Yes, better to interrupt me than Jim here. So I'm going to pass the mic to you, Jim, and take it away.
Yay! Hi, everybody. I am so excited to be here. Woohoo! Um, can I share my screen? Is that what's
Please do.
happening?
Oh yeah, share your
It
screen.
says you cannot share screen while the other participant is sharing. So
Oh, I'm so sorry. Did I not
get
stop
off the
mine?
share button, lady.
I
I'm
know. Let
teasing
me
you.
stop. And actually, I forgot to say something, folks. If you have any questions for Jim's presentation, please make sure to pop it in the Q&A section versus the chat section, because I believe he's going to be using chat for some conversation with y'all, and we want to make sure to separate the questions from the chat. So questions go in
Yeah,
Q&A. Thank you.
cool. All right, I'm so excited. So let's see. I am going to share desktop two and boom. All right. So I'm hoping everyone can see my presentation
Yep, looks good.
as opposed to the uh, window. Okay, great. Thank you. Welcome. My name is Jim Barker, and I have a consulting firm in Seattle called Birch Consulting, and the website is birchconsultingllc.com. And yeah, I had a lot of fun presenting. I used to work for the Fred Hutch doing performance improvement. And then I worked at REI Co-op and did performance improvement and had a fun presentation there when I worked at REI where we set up a campsite up on at the Washington State Lean Conference. Washington Government Lean Conference, we set up a camp up on the stage. I wonder if anyone was there and saw that. As we talked about how the lean principles exist also in nature, and we follow them when we are in the great outdoors as well. So it's a really fun sort of way and take to look at the lean principles. So yeah, I've been around for a little bit and really enjoy continuous improvement under all of its auspices and names. Okay, today we're going to talk about this thing that I call the behavioral cycle of results, but really you could call it whatever you want. So here's my question. What if there was a way to not only understand our results or KPIs, but to understand and control the leading indicators that reliably indicate those results? So you can light up the chat with your comments as we go along. You can have your critical comments. I love those because they help us think and think on our feet. And I love the agreement as well. So you're welcome to do both. Um, is it possible? I mean, how many times have we struggled with figuring out what our leading indicators are on results? It's in all the businesses I've been in, it's been this question and this endeavor to find the leading indicators. So it's an interesting sort of idea. So I'm curious, in the chat, do you have any leading indicators for your KPIs? Do you guys, do all of you folks, have those conversations ever?
And feel free to unmute if you would like to speak your answer.
DMM says yes. Well, you could say a little more if you want. Mm. Jackie says, just trying to get data in general is a challenge, to be honest. I know, exactly. You would think a hospital system would be really good at data, but not always, right? And it's where I used to work. So a lot of businesses have a hard time with that. Government, I think, probably has a particular, challenge with that. Sam says, seems like leading indicator often defaults to the production numbers. Exactly. If we make this many, we'll have this many to ship out. That's kind of like not at all a leading indicator. Megan says, I lead a lot of discussions about how to measure process time and the level of quality, but it's not easy. Yeah, how do you know before your process time, which is a past a metric, it's already happened, and the level of quality is already too late. You're counting quality after it's already been made. So those are lagging indicators. How do I predict something with a leading indicator? Anish says a lot of organizations measure lagging indicator and aren't matured enough to measure leading yet. Yeah, I think that a lot of so-called leading indicators, um, we're looking for a hard number. We're looking for something that we can count, and we're not thinking about what leading indicators actually are. So this is where I will posit an idea around leading indicators. Last one I'm going to read. Jennifer says, not believing the results, making excuses for what the data says, and then changing it to suit. Can we all give Jennifer Whitmore an amen? Like, exactly. This is what often happens is, oh, well, we're not going to meet that metric, so let's lower it. Or, oh, we have more of a metric than we expected, so let's raise the number. That happened at a previous company I worked at, which I probably shouldn't say who it was, all the time. And it shocked me because our bonuses were tied to that. And then they didn't want to go without a bonus, so they changed the you know, the success metric. Oh my goodness. All right. What are some of the results? So this is also light up the chat with some of these. What are some examples of results you were working to achieve with Results Washington? What are some of the things that say or that tell us that we're successful? DMM 206 says leading indicators can start by creating models of change, measuring factors and adjusting models over time. This work is extremely satisfying, but it doesn't happen overnight. Yeah, that's true. Yep, that's true. Okay, what are some of the results? Just quickly, some maybe single words. What are things that you guys are measuring? Customer satisfaction, says Brigitte. Operational efficiency and operative performance. Jennifer says uptime. Hey, Brigitte, I'm curious. How do you measure operational performance? Is that a actual number?
Are you
I'm
there?
just curious about that. Hello?
Good.
Uh-oh. Someone is
Uh-oh.
unmuted.
Yep. Remember to
That
mute
might
your
be
mics, folks.
that might be you. Yeah, somebody. Okay, operative performance. And you can unmute if you want to share something verbally instead of in the chat. Okay, uptime, equity, onboarding, time of delivery for customers. Teresa, I'm curious about equity. How do you measure that? What's the number? I mean, I'm seriously curious about that. Jessica
Yeah.
says statistics.
Mhm.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I mean, it's a ongoing conversation, but just really making sure that, we're reaching as many people as possible with our services and just ensuring that, everybody has that equitable access to the services that the state of Washington
And
offers.
do you have a dashboard where you measure that? How many people of color, how many women, how many oppressed communities you're reaching, or is that still difficult to?
It's still difficult. We're working on our statewide performance management system now, and just
Yeah,
kind of really leaving it up to the agencies that really work directly with those populations to figure out the best way to do that. So yeah, it's a
yeah,
challenge for
yeah. That's
sure,
great.
but
Thank you,
important.
thank you, thank you for sharing that. Jackie, you have your hand up if you wanted to unmute.
Yeah, I struggle a little bit with things like coming to Results Washington. Like I love coming here and I always learn something. So for me, it is worthwhile to come here. But I wonder, like, how do the organizers collect those indicators to show that the content and everything is what they're trying to deliver is of value to the people? I don't know, maybe I'm like jumping at like randomly,
Uh,
but
No, that's a good question. You
so
want me
you're.
to answer
Oh
that, Jim?
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we have sent out surveys. We have had little activities during COPs in the past where we've kind of done a word cloud or mural where we'll say, hey, what are some topics you want to hear? And folks will type in a bunch of things and we'll go and take those results and kind of do our recruiting around that. And when we first, as it pertains to, getting the right audience, and when we first started our COP, we reached out to a lot of the lean advisors and lean COPs and other agencies and said, hey, spread the word. This is what we've got going on, and we want to make sure that all your people know about it. I don't know if that answers your question, but we definitely put our feelers out there and ask intentional questions from our community to get ideas of what they want to hear on.
perfect, thanks.
Brigitte, did you want to unmute?
Yes, thank you so much. Yes. So to answer your question, for me, I would say, for instance, we are 150 participants right now in the room. How I will measure the operative performance will be by how many people are engaged in this conversation. At the end of this meeting, I would like to conduct a survey to see how many people actually got engaged, or look at the chat and see. You see what I mean? That's one way. And then another way is looking at maybe defects. If it's a manufacturer company, for instance, defects. But for, my company or where I work, I will look at, how many mistakes, the errors, the error rate, or the profit margins. This is how you can measure operative performance.
Yeah, those are lagging indicators, right, Brigitte? Those are things that have already happened and that you can measure. Leading indicators are much harder to figure out, and to, like, what are the leading indicators that are going to result in profit, or what are the leading indicators that are going to result in engagement? So those are the things that I think we have a lot of, that we don't often think about. That we don't often orient our business, our ideas around leading indicators. So I think that's a challenging, it's a question. These are some of the results. And I love how you said, yes, absolutely. Those are excellent examples of results. So thank you so much, Brigitte.
So can you do a projection of, based on what you've done previously? Can you project into what you're going to lead into in future?
Absolutely. And that's what we're going to talk about.
Okay,
we're going to talk about the cycle of results and what is the leading indicator. So that's what I'm making you very curious about. What is it? And this is where I want you, Brigitte. Right. I have you right where I want you.
You got me, because I'm always very curious. Well, you got me.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you could do a forecast, says Lena. Price elasticity modeling requires using leading indicators. That's right. You could use some fancy math and things like that to look at what are leading indicators, and modeling, which are predictive, sort of models. And that's one of the things to do. Absolutely. Okay. So what gets in the way of our results? This is easy. What gets in the way of results? Well, when we talk about lean, what we're talking about is waste. So what is waste? So this is one of the ways to conceptualize. One of the mental models for lean waste is the acronym downtime, which helps you remember the eight of the, there are probably more, 8 of the wastes that exist in business. Defects, and I'm sure many of you have seen something like this, something similar. Defects, overproduction, waiting, non-utilized talent, transportation, inventory, motion, and extra processing. So we use the downtime. I think there's another acronym. Talia, do you guys use a different, do you all use another, or are you familiar with the other acronym?
No, there's not another one we use.
Oh, okay, great. So Tim Woods. Thank you, Todd. That's it. Yes, the Tim Woods acronym is the other one. Yeah, and I think that they're rather similar, just a different acronym, but I kind of like the downtime acronym myself. Todd, thank you. You really saved my tuchus there. Okay. So let's look at this little picture that I made for you all in PowerPoint. So how do the wastes show up? They show up in all these ways, right? Capacity issues. You have had these experiences. You have had issues with capacity. You have had issues with errors in your work, with breakdowns, programs that are disconnected, which cause delays, all kinds of things. Long data entry times. You've had scheduling issues. These are all things that we are up against in the workplace. Right? Right. So what do we have to do in order to get our little boat through this little, process, through the flow of the work? Well, the flow is blocked, right? So our boat can't get through. So what do we have to do? Well, we have to raise the water line, so to speak. We have to have more resources so that we can overcome these barriers. That's what we say. We say we have barriers, we need more resources. So if you do not fix those problems or these issues, then you really do, in your current process with those errors and those issues, you do need more people. You do need more resources, more inventory. That's absolutely true, because you need to get, the flow going. But of course, what did we just do? We just hid the problems under the water, and oh, look at that. The boat is about to get speared by that sharp rock. And this is because we lifted the resources to just enough, but there's still problems and they're under the surface, so we don't really see them. So this is the diagram for how waste gets in the way. So what do we have to do in order to, the boat has to get through, the process has to get done. So what happens? Well, I get Todd and Lena, and I get Sam and Jessica and Megan and Teresa and Jennifer and Brigitte and Megan and everyone, Anish, to all lift the boat out of the water and move it over the barrier. That's what we do. And you know what that's called? More speeches, less battleships. Elizabeth, you are hilarious. So what does that mean? What does that mean? Yeah, it's the sea of heroism. It can lead to burnout for sure. But this is not only the ocean of resources, but also the ocean of heroes. And how many of you get praise for being a hero? How many times have you been like, so glad to, help someone help the organization out of a sticky situation by staying late or working on a weekend or doing something. And then folks say, gosh, thank you so much for doing that. So for sure, Jessica, clarity around goals and priorities is important. Yes. But really tackling the waste and problem solving is what makes a big difference. So how often have you had to be a hero? I already know the answer, so I checked the box for you. Too often, right? That's right, Sam, solving the right problem. Yep. And sometimes we have to solve a lot of wrong problems before we get to the right problem. So let's talk about this. Now that we know that waste stands in the way of our results, and we have this idea of heroism, what is the cycle to get results? How do we start? Let me go through this little process for you. So how do we handle tough times? When all we feel is burnout from all of the heroism that we've done. We have frustration and fatigue. I can't believe the organization is in this spot again. When we feel personally aligned with the work and the mission of what you're doing, but you get lost in the fray of achieving it. I felt that way at nonprofits that I've worked at. So what happened to the joy that's in work? Remember when you first started, you thought, oh, this is going to be kind of fun. What sapped it away? And more importantly, what brings that joy back? We've all heard this saying, doing more with less. We just have to do more with less. The budget, the constituents, oh my gosh, whatever it is. Most orgs are desperately seeking high performance, but very few understand what that high performance is, what it looks like, and even fewer know what it takes to get there and sustain. It doesn't stop organizations from throwing words around. We need to do more with less. We need to get more efficient. The truth is, there's another way to read this. To be able to do more with less effort or easier. So there's this phrase can kind of be read in two different ways, right? In some ways, when we apply continuous improvement, a philosophy of continuous improvement, we are able to do more with less resources, with less effort, with less problems, with less frustration, with less burnout. So that's kind of the positive way to look at it. Unfortunately, a lot of times it's said, we don't have the resources and we are not going to fix the problem. So you just have to muscle through it. So do less with more. Elizabeth says, we operate in a permission-based culture that leads to performance lags. Decision rights need to be expanded. Distributed decision-making is important. Yeah, I love that comment. Definitely true. So have you ever experienced the use of a tool across an organization with the hope of dramatic improvements, but very limited results? Has someone come in and said, or have you done it to someone where I have done this? Standard work for everybody. Kanban boards everywhere. You know what we need here is a hijunka. Why a hijunka? This is something that happens is, we come in and we have these tools and we end up being a tool instead of applying a tool. And the tools don't really make sense to people, or, they just don't sustain. Everyone has to use a tool. If not, it won't work. That's true, Jesse, but not everyone uses the tools, and there's reasons for that. How about this one? We end up being a tool. SharePoint. Oh my gosh, Sam. Okay. Have you ever experienced a series of point improvements, but no overall strategy linking the improvements together? I have experienced that. Oh, we're improving this. Now it's like whack-a-mole with improvements, right? So yeah. So Anish says we need a hammer to chip those rocks in the sea. What is the metaphor? What is the hammer? So that's what I'm talking about. Have you ever experienced resistance to improvement efforts? Because in the past that, TQI program didn't work, or that other guy came in, we had that other, consultant, and, that was terrible. And so there's resistance, to new efforts to create improvement. So these are all things that have happened. You're not alone. Leaders are responsible for results. Employees deserve meaningful work. Most organizations have tried an enterprise-wide improvement effort or program. Most have tried, and most have not worked. Most experience a series of programs rather than a pursuit of a philosophy of improvement. So Jay Leiker and M. Rother wrote this article, Why Lean Programs Fail. That's at the Lean Enterprise Institute in 2011. It's still true today. And it's really, it's a very insightful article. I don't know if you can still find it since lean.org has transformed into a consultancy, but yeah, I'm glad you guys are having a good response to these things. So what we need is a new path. So here is the behavioral cycle of results. We'll start this way. How do you get results, and what are the leading indicators? So everything that I have found in my experience is it all starts with principles. And a lot of times there are the principles that we're taught, like the lean principles are like one-piece flow or standardization, or the like Little's Law, or weird stuff like that. We put the cart before the horse in teaching improvement principles before we teach the foundational principles that need to be out there. So what is a principle? Principle is a universal truth that governs consequences. If leaders and employees if everyone doesn't understand the principles, or if they ignore the guiding principles, it will put a company out of business, or it'll create extraordinary backlogs or all kinds of problems within, an organization. Here are some key points about guiding principles. Principles are not the same as values. You create your values often throughout your life. They do govern your behaviors, but they are really personal and subjective. People have different values, and companies can have different values. They're not sort of these like laws of physics-ish type of things. Although some may be very similar, like, some are universal values that we should all hold. They're not exactly like principles. Principles govern everyone. They're universal truths. They govern everyone, and they govern consequences and outcomes. If you, okay, let's see. Understanding the principles will help to identify ideal behaviors. And we're going to talk about that in a second. Yeah, okay, let's keep going. So these are the principles that I teach. I've divided them up into 9 principles, and I teach the first 6 to begin with. And I actually will be giving Talia a handout for all of you. I'll talk about that in a minute. So the lean principles that I use are respect for people, lead with humility, learn continuously. I teach those first and engage the people in this idea, especially the senior leaders. The second set is create value for the customer, systems thinking, and constancy of purpose. And those are the next three I teach. Again, first the leaders, then the people. Then I work on the improved principles, embrace standardization, solve problems scientifically, and then under always improve or pursue perfection sometimes, that's when you have the create, flow and pull, quality at the source, visual controls, create proximity and co-location, use reliable tested technology, and level the workload. And there's others in there. But those are like the technical improvement principles that guide us when we're actually, doing improvement. Without the first six, you're really not going to get very far with the last three, because people won't be able to link embrace standardization or the tool of standard work without understanding that it's a tool of respect and humility and learning. So this is the idea. Okay, Anish says problem is sometimes upper management wants results soon, and lean leaders are forced to implement programs for short-term results rather than build foundational principles. That is 100% true. It is that's why it's really key that senior leaders understand lean. And I know that that's the big thing is how. Okay, thanks, Leah. I'll look at that. How do we engage senior leaders? By understanding this model, you may be able to have a conversation with leaders as to the breadth and the importance of their participation. Okay, so now that we understand what a principle is, understanding the principles will help to identify ideal behaviors, and we call these the KBIs, or the key behavior indicators. What is a key behavior indicator? Here we go, everybody. The key behavior indicator is the leading indicator for results. That's absolutely true. Let me give you an example. This is a very easy example. Oh, thanks, Sam, for coming. The easy example is when you walk into an REI store, you're supposed to be, if the standard is that you were given a warm welcome. You were welcomed to the store. And that behavior of welcoming someone, hi, welcome to REI, hi, welcome to this shop. What can I help you find? It increases It increases someone's potential of buying something, and it decreases the possibility of theft and shoplifting. So the results of shrinkage, it's called shrinkage when you count up how much is stolen. The results are shrinkage and sales. When you look at those, the leading indicator is when there's a warm greeting at the door. We know that those things move in the best directions. That's one example. Here's some others. So let's talk about what a behavior is. A behavior is something we could see. It's not a feeling that someone has. It's not a sense of something. It's actually something we can capture with a video. And principles are foundational to defining ideal behaviors. So let's try this example. So there are rules and there are principles, and I want to make a distinction between those. So here's a rule, RCW 4661050. If anyone is in transportation or law enforcement, they may know this. Every pedestrian shall obey the instructions of any official traffic control device applicable thereto, and as specified in this chapter. We have this, funny Seattle meme that we'll stand there in the rain without an umbrella waiting for the crosswalk to change, the walk sign to go. Because in Seattle, we tend not to jaywalk. It's a very funny thing about Seattle. That's why I picked this one, because it makes me laugh. Okay, and because I've been stopped by a police officer for jaywalking downtown Seattle. I admit it. He did not give me a ticket, though. All right, so what is You've been stopped. Rachel's been stopped for jaywalking. Exactly, Rachel. You and I, we need to go have coffee and vent to each other. Okay, so what is the principle behind this rule? What principle stands behind this rule? What do you think it might be? Teresa, to keep everyone safe. Yes. Teresa didn't have the answers, I promise. Yes, safety. So would the principle, Teresa, be safety? Do you think that's it? Probably, yes. So if the principle is safety, let's just say that. This is my question. Can you think of a situation where you must break the rule, in order to follow the principle of safety? What's a situation where you break the rule to follow the principle of safety? Obviously, it's not the rain.
The only thing that
Car
I can
careening.
think of- Oh, sorry,
Okay,
Jim.
hold on. Car careening towards the sidewalk. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, Melinda's spot on. I was gonna say if like something crazy is happening in the road and you have to dart across the street in order to
Yeah.
avoid that car careening. Right
Yeah,
on, Melinda.
That's exactly right. Monica says to rescue someone who's fallen, pulling over for an emergency vehicle. Well, if you're a pedestrian, what if there's an ominous or dangerous looking situation that's happening, exigent circumstances? Great, John. I love your 3 penny words are awesome. Yeah. So if there's an exigent circumstance, like there's a dangerous situation happening, or there's, maybe a, worrisome thing, you might want to cross the street against the light. So these are all ways to follow a principle and still follow and maybe break the rule. Exactly. Now you guys are thinking of crazy ideas. So this is great. So this happens at work. At work, there are these rules, and these tools. You all are nuts. I love this. But what is the principle behind them? And how often do we really look at the principle behind what we're doing? Believe me, I've had some terrible supervisors who have come down on me about the nitty-gritty of the rules when I have been following what I believe is the principle of the idea. And that could be super frustrating, especially when there's a meteor shower. Thank you, Jessica. Okay, so here's some examples. So I have the expanded version of this available to you. The PDF will be emailed to Talia and she'll post it. Lead with humility. So what kind of behaviors might we see if this principle was understood and applied in an organization? Exactly, the spirit of the law, Eric. That's exactly what we mean. So leaders, if we're talking about senior leaders or executives, we would see humility be expressed by maintaining open and honest two-way communication with everyone throughout the organization. That does not mean more emails. Maybe that means an openly visible visual management system or metrics or dashboard or something like that. Treat all ideas as equal in value, no matter whose idea it is, especially if it's a weird idea. That would be really great for leaders to do, to embrace the weird ideas, to embrace everyone's ideas and really be able to consider them and understand why the person might be suggesting that. And as you are leaders, this is something for you to do if you're going to lead with humility. Ask supportive questions rather than giving answers or solutions. Oh, tell me more about that. How do you think this would work? Wow, that's fascinating. So tell me more about this process. And these kind of questions that have the person really explain and develop their idea. And then actively seek input from everyone to encourage solutions that are built by collaboration. So instead of one person giving you a tool, it's everyone coming up with something that could work, or a few different experiments to try. Managers would do the same thing, maintain open and honest two-way communication, whether it's a visibility board or a dashboard or something like that. Treat ideas as equal, ask supportive questions, and they would identify and communicate trends about what is working and what is not working. Their job is to communicate good news, but especially bad news up, which no one likes to do, and be able to have that communication, be that communication conduit back and forth between the executive leadership and the people who are on the front line or facing the customer or the constituent. And then the people who are facing the constituent, the front line, listen to and communicate feedback from the customers, fellow staff members, and stakeholders that may impede the value creation process. So this is, communicate about the problems and the things that block us, the rocks that are in the water. These are examples of behaviors. All of these behaviors can be seen. They could be videotaped if we were video recording. These are all behaviors, and we know that these behaviors lead to specific results. So when we understand the principles and we've identified some key behaviors we'd like to see, we then create or can create systems within which those behaviors are supported. So examples are a feedback system, like an employee recognition system, could support the behavior of employee accolades or respect for people. And that's based on the principles: respect for people, the behavior is employee recognition, and the system is the employee recognition program or system. But there's a system operating in your department, your division, your organization already. Believe it or not, your system is producing the behaviors and the results exactly as it's designed right now. That's a very tough. I remember when my sensei told me that, he said, yeah, the system is working exactly as designed, or as not designed in our case. And I was like, ouch, that's so hard. And it really did blow my mind, because I realized, wow, our lack of planning has created this labyrinthian system. So it's an intense thing. Okay, I want to look at some of the Q&A. So DMM 206, you have, thank you for getting in there with the Q&A. You said, why do we assume that the frontline staff should not be treating all ideas as equal in value? I'm concerned that this assumes frontline staff are not respected to have discernment. Oh, that is not at all what is implied by this slide. Certainly, the frontline can do all of the things, all of the behaviors that the leadership is doing. And it is not that, but this is I have found that when you ask the frontline to do some of the things, some of the behaviors that leaders do, they can have a lot of like, I'm not getting paid to be a manager type of response. But actually, when you say that, I think that could be moved to the front line. And I think you can take this and be inspired and decide, like, gosh, for the people who are facing our constituents, what are the behaviors I would like to see, and move them over. Think of this as a suggestion, not a commandment. I hope that's helpful. Okay. So here's an example of a management system. This is my diagram of a daily management system that includes the standard work, the online response system. When something is not working correctly, we have a standard online response to that. And we have signals that tell us that we need to escalate, which does not escalate up, but escalate out to have more people, respond to the online issue. We have an offline response system, which is the problem solving, so that we can solve the online problem that's happening during the production time or during, clinic time, or this was in a hospital in this situation. There's a visibility wall with leader standard work, and leader standard work is the work specifically to support the daily management system. And then we have the control board and the huddle and the continuous improvement boards that are pretty standard, with a lean or a daily management system. That's an example of a system that helps to create ideal behaviors, or can. Okay, so now we have the tools. So most organizations start here. They start with the tools, Kanban, standard work, all these tools, and don't really create a system and haven't really looked at deeply into the principles and then the behaviors that we'd like to see. So I teach it in the direction that it goes. I start with principles and behaviors, then I teach about systems, and then I introduce tools way later, which goes against, someone said, senior leaders really want immediate results. They want results this quarter. They're not willing to wait. And yeah, this is part of that go slow to go fast idea of lean. Lean is not, I have an article on my website in my blog that says there's no ROI in lean. There's no ROI in lean. The reason I say that, there's an asterisk, is most people are looking for return on investment of lean within a year or within 6 months. They think that it's a way to get profit or the way to get efficiency fast. And that is, in my view, that is absolutely not true. I think of lean as an investment. It's expensive and it's important to invest in lean so that in the long term, your results are exponentially better than anyone else. So that's kind of the idea. So I'm never interested in consulting with someone who wants quick results or fast responses. You can do that temporarily with some of the tools, but you'll injure people's trust, and it doesn't really work as a sustaining idea. But the tools are super helpful. So when you do have Kanban boards, when you do have value stream maps, as are shown here, you do have an opportunity to, once you realize that this is helping with the principle of respect and visibility and transparency, with humility, that we don't know what's going on as executives, so we would like to see it. So these kind of things happen, and they're behind the use of these tools and others. And that's when we get the results. We don't really have much control over the results once they've happened. It's so interesting how our default is the employee engagement scores are low, and then we go backwards. The traditional way of doing it is go back to look at the tools. Well, we're not using the right, suggestion boxes, or we don't have the employee, maybe we need to put the employee accolades or the employee recognition as a form on the website, on SharePoint, or who knows what people do. But they always seem to go back and attack like either the person or the tools. And instead of what they could do, which is what I'm going to show you in a minute. Results are, a result. It's a metric. It tells you how healthy or how unhealthy your system, your entire cycle is. So we have ownership, and this is a very holistic idea of ownership. It does not mean that in absentia of any other input, these folks make these decisions. This means that they have ownership over creating engagement with these ideas. So executives have ownership to create engagement with the principles and ideal behaviors. That's like an executive board, policy advisors, or agency leaders are ideas of what the executives might be. Management, supervisors, own or have the responsibility to engage people in systems, right, that support the ideal behaviors, people like division directors, managers, supervisors, and others. And so they really are the ones who are, with cooperation of everyone, creating those systems that work. And then individual contributors, the people who are facing the customer or the constituent, own and are responsible for creating engagement around the tools that they use. So we can suggest tools, but we don't mandate that people use these tools with Japanese names that no one knows what they are. And then the results are just the results. And the results, when they are deeply understood, influence not the tools and the use of the tools, but they influence the executives and the executives' deep understanding, or lack thereof, of the principles and understanding of the behaviors that go with those principles. For example, if your employee recognition system or your results of your employee engagement score is low, look not to the tools you're using, but look to the principles. Do you understand respect for people? And what are the behaviors that you would have under respect for people? Do you understand lead with humility and the behaviors that go with that as an executive? And do you understand at all levels what those might look like in your agency, in your organization? That's what the KPIs should be used to interrogate, are the understanding of the principles and the behaviors, not interrogate the tools and the people. So it creates this virtuous cycle, right? We adjust the systems, it just continues. We need to cradle this for it to really work with psychological safety. And I'll talk about what psychological safety is right now. Psych safety is an idea coined by Dr. Amy Edmondson from Harvard. She was researching medical, like surgical suites, and what are the best surgical teams. And she figured that the ones with the fewest errors reported would be the best teams. But what she found was the ones who reported the most errors tend to be the best teams, because they had enough psychological safety to actually report when there were little errors and little mistakes along the way. And it was counterintuitive to her. And so she coined this idea of psych safety. And she has this four square chart where companies can have high or low psychological safety, and they can have high or low accountability. And it puts a company or an organization or an agency into one of these zones. She's calling them comfort zone, apathy zone, anxiety zone, and learning zone. Learning zone meaning success zone. Lena says, agree that with the idea that behaviors trickle downwards. So if the principles are not modeled at the top, it will be evident in the front line. That is exactly what I'm saying. And I think we see that throughout organizations. When the executives don't model the principles, I mean, when I had an executive, and every time he was all talk about lean when we were having a lean meeting, but when it was the all hands, he said, go faster, we got to go faster. And you better believe that every project, everything that we did was about fast, not about good, and not about cheap. Or, it was like, we're just going to go fast no matter what it costs and no matter what it takes and no matter what it does to people. So executives really have to mind their words. If they walk into a room and are like, I don't really like that chair, you better believe that chair will be gone the next day, because we forget when we're executives how strong our words can be. Okay, so what happens when we have high psychological safety, but not really a lot of accountability? Oh, wait, what happens when we have low psychological safety and very low accountability, right? It's the apathy zone. So we have fear. I don't know what's going to happen. When it's going to matter. There's a lot of errors. Well, we can fix that later. We don't have to fix that now. Well, I'm not really accountable for that. I don't know who owns it, right? Theft can happen when you have an apathy zone. There's not a lot of accountability. Things like that can happen. When you're in the anxiety zone, this is high accountability, but no psych safety. You cannot fail. You are not allowed to show that you can fail. People will come down on you. You might get bullying, infighting, and results are more important than people. If you have the comfort zone, there's a lot of waste. That's low accountability, but lots of psych safety. Oh my God, we love each other on this team. We're like family. And there's not a lot of accountability. Well, if we get those results, we can whenever. There can be waste, a lot of slowness. Man, it takes forever for that team to do something. They're happy and they love each other, but they are not very efficient or effective. And there can be confusion. This is where we all really care about each other, but man, we do get our lines crossed and double communication, and we step on each other's toes, and it can be bumbling. So you may work in one of these areas. You may be in the learning zone. That's where there's a lot of success against your metrics or profitability. in in the marketplace. There could be a lot of development. People are developed. They learn from the things that they're doing, from their successes, not just from their admonitions. And so there's a lot of that there. And there's a lot of joy. There tends to be a lot of enjoyment of the work. So I sometimes have people do a little self-assessment. This is a tool I use to say, where do you think you are and why? So I've done that with executive teams in sort of evaluating their own organization and where they think they are. And then I have the employees do it. And often it's a different result, and it's quite revealing. Okay. Did someone have a question about that? No. So what happens? This cycle, when we implement it, is slow. It has slow gains at first, so it requires that investment mentality. There's learning at all levels. It is culturally relevant. This is not something that you introduce and is suddenly like this foreign idea. It is a natural enhancement of your own culture. If your culture is positive, it brings out the positive aspects of your culture. It creates synergy and self-sustainment because it reinforces itself and is a honing tool to get better understanding the principles and the behaviors that go with. And you have exponential growth and improvement when you do this. You start to see, your metrics rise in a really dramatic way after a while, like after years of doing this. And you start to have a culture of continuous improvement, or a culture of joy in the work starts to happen. Okay, so I want to know what questions you might have at this point, since I'm going to shift a little bit on third topic, and then we'll do big Q&A at the end. Any questions about this cycle that you want clarified on, something that you didn't understand? Now's your chance. You can raise your hand and then you can unmute, or you can chat.
Hey, Jim, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if I'm saying the name right. Curry had put in there when you were talking about, leadership that wants to move fast. And then, it creates problems later in the future. And Curry said fast work and mediocre outcomes equals more rework. I know
love that
that
comment, Carrie.
it's a great comment. And I know that I've heard that time and time again. And sometimes that happens, with state government. And so my question is in your experience, what has been your response to that when a lot of times folks have to kind of go along with the direction that they're being given?
It's true. I mean, we have leaders that have not invested time and energy into understanding the principles, and they're up against like bonuses and directives from other leaders above them, or from their perception of constituent demand via laws or voting or outcomes. So there's a lot of that challenge that, and this is true outside of government. In regular business, I need profits now, get profitable fast. I worked at a .com, and that was their internal slogan. Get big fast. No, the first one was get big fast, and then he was like, oh shoot, get profitable fast. So we have these issues in all organizations. We have the issue of human impatience, and it's really important to look at that idea of do it right the first time. That's really what we're up against. Is we could do a right now fix, but we've all done that with our homes or our cars or whatever at times when we didn't have money. But it's really supposed to be a temporary fix, because the next fix will be far more expensive, and you'll just be doing it twice. You're putting good money after bad. We have so many sayings, a stitch in time. There are, the Band-Aid method, exactly. There are so many examples of that. When I worked at a hospital, I used to talk to the nurses and say, Band-Aiding is something that, you don't clean the wound. Bad problem solving is you don't clean the wound, you just put a Band-Aid on it. And of course, the nurses start to cringe. You should start to cringe too if you're watching. And instead of cleaning the wound or whatever, we're just going to put Band-Aid on it. And then of course it gets a little red on the edges of the Band-Aid, and the person is like, oh, it's starting to hurt a little bit. Just put a bigger Band-Aid on it. And then there starts to be some veining that you see. And, there's some other sort of like signs. You're like, oh, let's just wrap it in gauze. And we just continually Band-Aid and Band-Aid over this festering wound instead of really getting to the origins, right? For a tourniquet or for good disinfectant and good management of the wound in the first place. Megan says, yep, a Band-Aid is not suitable. It's not a substitute for a tourniquet. Yes. So that's kind of the idea, is what we actually do when we're not solving problems when they're small. Okay, I love these comments. Band-Aid method, idea fairies. Karen says, that's what I call idea fairies. I think idea fairies sounds kind of cool, but I think she didn't mean it as a cool thing. Like, it just, tell me more what you mean by that, Carrie. I think that's so cute. Okay, Teresa says, how do you appropriately balance the need for quick change due to mandates with quickly approaching deadlines, with ensuring that we set the foundation for success and building a culture so we can sustain these implementations? Yeah, very challenging conversations. I love having challenging conversations with executives, right? Because, they're demanding something that they don't have to do. And they're asking for something that's there. So we must sort of look at it and say, well, of course we have timing issues. Do we want this to actually sustain and learn from something and be less time in the long run? Or do you want to just fix it now? Because fixing it now is not lean. Don't go in thinking lean as a short-term fix, because it'll make everyone have real negative feelings towards lean. Megan, oh yeah, we talked about that one. Sandra, do you have any tips for taking an organization who deployed lean tools as the foundation to a culture of continuous improvement? Yes. Start to look at the lean tool and start to think about, what's the principle behind that tool? What's the principle behind standard work? And can we start to understand the principle and the behaviors, not just this tool of standard work or this tool of a visibility board or whatever the tools you were tooled with happen to be. Jackie says, I'm focusing on email, incremental changes, always big projects underway, but they're taking time and money. People tend to feel like they have no autonomy with these big projects, but they do with small improvements. That's true. It's good to start with small improvements so people get used to it. That's absolutely true. Okay. Fairy dust is being sprinkled everywhere with no end progressive results, says Elizabeth about the fairy ideas. Yeah. Oh, I'm missing all kinds of comments here. People first, mission always. Not all leaders understand the value of this. Thank you, Elizabeth. That's exactly true. And I agree with what Carrie says. Yeah. Okay, we peeled off work and did a proof of concept on a small scale and then played easy add-on. Yeah, that'd be great, John, for you to present about that if you haven't already, because I think that would be a great thing to learn from if it worked. Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent. Okay, so this cycle is, and I love that question about most organizations started with tool-based first, right? So I really love that, that what you brought up, Sandra, sorry if I'm mispronouncing. How do we switch from that? I think that's a very keen, question. And I think it does begin with, what you have and starting to understand it. One reason why people resist improvement. So I'm going to shift a little bit. Why do people resist some of the lean improvements that we bring? Here's one of the reasons. There's lots of reasons. Here's one of them. And I just wanted to bring in this idea of selective perception. I hope you think that picture is funny. I think it's hilarious and very cute. Selective perception is the process by which individuals perceive what they want to while ignoring opposing viewpoints. It's believing what you think. So in other words, it's a form of bias, interpreting information in a way that's congruent with my existing values and beliefs. So if I believe that the world is flat, then I'm going to interpret everything in a flat earth way. Human judgment and decision-making is distorted by an array of cognitive, perceptual, and motivational biases, right? We have all of these different biases that play into this. And we tend not to recognize our own bias. We tend to see the bias in others, but we fail often to recognize it in ourselves. In fact, we tend to overestimate the role of bias in other people while ignoring our own bias. So it's a very interesting thing. So failing to recognize our own bias prevents us from working to correct either our bias or the erroneous information that we might have, like in this picture of an Earth-centric solar system or universe. When presented with counterintuitive principles, so when we say the Earth is round, when you look out and it's obviously flat, the bias of intuition is often stronger than the facts of observation. This is just true. So this is such an important idea. There were studies at Yale about over football scores. You may have heard about resistance and poor acceptance will result when biased experience and memory is in conflict to presented principles, regardless of the data or evidence. So it doesn't matter how much data or evidence you have that lean works. If it goes against someone's bias or their intuition or their common sense, they ain't gonna do it. So let's check some of those out. These are some of the selective perception examples in lean. Batch processing feels more efficient than single piece flow. If I have a whole bunch of stuff that I'm working on and I'm always busy all day, that feels a lot more like I did a lot more work and I got a lot more done than just working on one piece at a time. So that's an example of selective perception in lean. Flexibility is diminished as standard work is applied. If we have standards and we can only do the standard work, then we have no flexibility. That's another misperception or a selective perception example. And if you actually have like some of these beliefs, that's great, because you can start to question that and say, wait, what does Jim mean? Having excess inventory or materials is better than having just enough of those things. Yeah, that's a selective perception. A lean environment requires everybody work harder is also a misperception of the truth or a selective perception. Too hard to do that lean stuff. Undefined roles are key to flexibility and high service levels. If your role is not defined, that's better because you're, Jane of all trades. You can do anything. Again, not true. The average pace, well, not supported by the data. The average pace of work is a key efficiency metric. When we do standard work, we just go by the average of what the people do. That's definitely a selective perception. Economies of scale means economies of scale means lean only works in high volume environments. Another selective perception. Metrics in a file folder or binder are effective visual controls. I have my standard work, it's in the binder. Totally good. And finally, lean principles add stress to everyone's work. Well, it depends how lean principles don't. It depends how the tools are applied, right? So let's look at the actual lean outcomes of these. Batch processing, more efficient than single piece flow. Actually, single piece flow is much more efficient than batch processing, even though it doesn't necessarily feel that way. It can feel very calm, very like a well-oiled machine. Flexibility diminished when standard work is there. Flexibility is actually increased when we have standards and standard work is applied. Oh, sorry, everybody, that you have to log off. I'm really glad you're all here. Having excess inventory, actually, when you have excess inventory or materials, it creates shortages, believe it or not. A lean environment makes the work easier in the long run. Undefined roles are the key to flexibility and high service levels when we know who's doing what and there's ownership. The average pace of work, the fastest pace of work is a key metric and a key benchmark for improvement. Economies of scale, often a source of extraordinary waste, have to be used carefully. Metrics in a file folder? No, visual controls must exist in line of sight from the work environment. Even if the work environment is online, you need to have your metrics visible while you're in the online environment. Finally, lean principles add stress. Lean principles are a way to create a joyful workplace. So how do we counter this selective perception? We have first awareness and acknowledgement. We have to become aware that these exist in the workplace and their impact. We have to look at ourselves, look within, see that the bias has always existed, and acknowledge how it's been expressed. We have to learn by taking risks and making mistakes. We'll only do that if it's a safe environment. We have to try an experiment and maybe try an experiment that follows a counterintuitive lean principle. And finally, we have to create structures, systems that help us counter bias in ourselves and in others. There are some resources that you'll get with this slide deck from the Shingo Institute, Amy Edmondson's book, The Fearless Organization, and the selective perception study, They Saw a Game. And that leads us to Q&A. Thank you, everybody. Sorry, the people had to go, had to jump.
Thank you, Jim. That was great. For folks who have questions for Jim, or maybe something you want to share that you might be going through project-wise or work or team-wise on your own team that maybe you want a little bit of insight from Jim on, please feel free
Free consulting.
Oh, is that what that is? Darn it. Yeah, feel free to come off of mute and let's engage in some conversation, or you can type it in chat if you'd like. I don't see any questions.
Love Elizabeth. There's one from Jennifer. How is single piece flow more efficient? I love that question, Jennifer. It makes it, you know what that makes me want to do? To come to your office and do a fabulous exercise that I have. It is counterintuitive, but when you have a system set up for flow from beginning to end, and you're just working on one piece at a time, it is remarkably more efficient than doing a little bit all over the place. So it's an experience. The experience of doing those exercises and seeing that happen is mind-blowing. And I love that you're in that space of like, wait, what? That curiosity is beautiful. I think it's really cool. Yeah.
So for IT, we're always looking for batch processing. So, and that I wasn't tracking on, slowing it down, making sure you can see each piece, not just thinking IT.
Yes. So what area do you work in? What area are you thinking about?
So I work in information services, and batch processing is like the buzzword. It's like, why don't we have a batch for that? Why don't we have a process? Why is that not automated? Sure. So that threw me. That number one threw me. Yeah.
So single piece flow in an IT environment, a lot of times the idea of agile and how agile creates sprints where many people are working on one idea at a time rather than spreading resources around and sort of like having this chaotic environment. Those agile sprints, and of course, I like it when people implement agile, not fragile. And what that means is agile means you implement the entire system. Most companies shortcut it and do something that I call fragile, which is they just do little sprints, or they don't really understand the full manifesto of agile and how, thank you for laughing, and how powerful that can be to work on it in one piece flow. We switched at the Seattle Cancer Care Alliance, the IT project management office started doing agile sprints on their projects. They actually didn't even do agile. They were just saying, we're just going to do one project at a time, go into this war room, and we're going to work on it till it's done. And they had a whole selection of people. They completed more projects that year than they have ever completed ever. So it's a very interesting counterintuitive concept, and it does work in IT environments and in all knowledge work, project work, stuff like that.
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, my pleasure. Okay, I love some of these questions. Let's see, where should we go? Hey, you watch for the Q&A. I'll look at the you're
We got
welcome.
one
You're
from
welcome.
Eric.
I love you. Okay, Eric, help me understand. You're not talking about removing the assembly line, right? Each person does only one task in a batch. Another does the next step. That's correct. A lot of times, if you have an assembly line, or if you think about the processes that you and other upstream and downstream departments or divisions or teams might be doing, you're basically have your role in what to do. But you do not start working on something until the upstream function gives it to you. And this avoids a batch of overproduction or inventory of things that are sitting there waiting for responses. So there is this de-optimization of individual work in order to optimize the broader spectrum of something being delivered from concept to constituent. So that is an important sort of idea, that it isn't just like my work, because everyone says this, well, my work is optimized. I am working all day long. It certainly feels that way. But when you look at from concept to constituent, from the entire value stream, you see that there's all kinds of overproduction. The waste really exists in between the silos. I hope that helps, Eric, or if that's clear. Talia will tell me if it's not clear. She'll be like, dude, no.
You're on it.
Anish says, oh, go ahead. What do you suggest to do with people that have no time to engage in lean conversations because they are too busy firefighting? You fight? No, I'm kidding. Yeah, there is a need for the idea that lean is an investment. You cannot, and it's just the fact, don't call it lean if you're not going to do it. Lean is an investment. You must bring, if your current process has all these problems, you have to increase your resources to get the boat over those rocks, metaphorically. You cannot be, I mean, you can wear people out and destroy people, and you'll end up seeing it in your, your results of employee satisfaction, your constituent satisfaction, your, all kinds of things will happen. So you have to have those tough conversations, and you need to have them more than once, because executives aren't coming down to the front line. They're not seeing the pain. They're not experiencing the pain you're experiencing. They have their own pain. They have their own things that they're fighting against, right? So there's a lot of things that happen where we're like very lightly resourced, and they're trying, then we demand to do lean. It's kind of like, oh, you broke your leg and you are exhausted and you have, fatigue, and you have to clean out the garage. It's like, come on, cleaning out the garage is like lean, right? It's this investment of time and energy to make something better. Okay. Rachel, we love fragile. Okay, I have one for all of them if you want to know. Lean, when you just implement tools, becomes mean. Six Sigma, when you only implement like the engineering or the tools, becomes sick Sigma. And Agile becomes fragile when you don't implement the entire thing or understand it. So don't do mean Six Sigma or fragile. I suggest Agile, Six Sigma, and lean.
Awesome. It looks like Jason shared a link for a video they use to look at the single piece flow when they teach their yellow belt class. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Jason. There's some very cool videos, and I probably know which one that is, but it's really cool to see that. It's even cooler to experience it. So bring me in and I'll do the airplane exercise with you. It's unlike any airplane exercise you've ever experienced, because I bring a cultural element to it, and we laugh our butts off. Oh my gosh, it is so much fun to do that in person. I promise that we laugh. Tremendous. Yeah. Improving the work is part of the work. Improving the work is the work. If every action we take is improving the work, it's awesome. Oh, Joseph, I'm so sorry. Joseph has his hand up. Unmute yourself, Joseph.
Oh, no problem. Thank you. This has been really great. I had my wife is a nurse, so I had an example, quick one about selective perception, but then I do have a question. So she had a patient come who was sick, and they were going to run a COVID test, and the patient said, "I don't believe in COVID. You don't have to run the test, or so don't run the test." And I was so it made me think of it. And you know, they didn't run the test, so
wait,
didn't have
does
COVID.
that work? I don't believe in the flu. I'm good.
Exactly. It was
I'm using that this fall. I'm totally using that.
I didn't want to get into it, but I just had to share because I thought, you know, that example came up.
It's
but
it's a great example.
How do you start the conversation? Because it seems the principles are, you know, kind of the foundation, like you said. How do you start the principle conversation? Because I think I tend to maybe start because I get excited about, you know, things that we're doing, but you know, if those principles aren't being communicated, aren't being you know, passed down, how does somebody start that, you know, who is not necessarily at the level, you know, at the executive level or the director level?
Yeah, it's hard when it is a true luxury to have an executive who embraces the principles and embraces learning. So that's a big thing that is a luxury if you have that. We often don't. And it's not because anyone is a jerk. It's because, you know, this is my sociologist side. Our society does not support leaders as learners. Our society supports leaders as knowers. Our society doesn't support leaders as collaborative. Our society supports leaders as commanders. So these things are normal, and they're societal, you know, creations, and that's how you get promoted, is because you've made tough, hard calls, and you've been lucky, and they've been successful, and you have a degree from Wharton or whatever the heck it is, right? So there's a lot of these sort of things that are there. So having those conversations is definitely a bold thing. I am a person who loves conflict because I have conflict coded with intimacy. We are going to be after we have a conflict or a disagreement, Joseph, you and I are going to be much closer friends. And it's like, I don't want to have conflict, but if I do, that's how I have those conversations. So going in and asking, what is it that you really want from this lean thing or from this continuous improvement thing or whatever? There was one agency I worked at, they were not allowed to say the word lean. I'm like, oh my gosh. So you can have this conversation and say, what are the things you want? In order to get there, let's talk about how it really works. How this is an investment in a 10-year endeavor, not an investment in a 6-month turnaround. And you know, those are tough conversations to have, and they're very risky because the executive might say, well, if you can't do it, I'm going to find someone who will, which is true. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people who are like, oh yeah, I can get you results in 6 months, and they can by implementing the tools, but they won't sustain. How many 5S's do we see that are still existing as a visual management system? Just look at my closet. I'm kidding. Yeah, so I hope that's helpful, Joseph. I wish that I had a better answer, that there was some magic fairy dust we could sprinkle on them.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
The slide deck is shared on our COP page on results.
There's an updated one coming. Yeah, that's closer to this. Yeah. Yep.
Yes, and I do believe that Teresa shared it in the chat earlier. We can share that again.
Kiana, we only have 4 minutes, but I want to hear.
4 minutes. 4 minutes. So much for taking my question. So how do you dispel like where the work starts and where it stops? I think that because we have the mindset of a finished product, if you will, you know, and how do you communicate the engagement is also the work?
I love this question, Kiana. You are genius. Yes, that's exactly right. Because you know, and I know that it starts with from concept, from the idea to the constituent, to the customer. And guess how many departments and divisions and teams that has to go through before it ends up with me as a constituent, right? As a citizen of Washington State. Yeah, it takes a lot. So being able to start to orient people towards the value stream mapping and the larger picture and say, yeah, these other departments, finance, IT, like even within our own division, they got to be part of this. And that's a key thing to say, hey, our team does our work, right? That's not a lean approach. A lean approach is, how does it flow through through all of government, right? How does the bus pass, start and end and get to the customer through the entire thing, right? Licensing, whatever the heck it is, right? Just a million things. So that's really the orientation that we have is, let's look outside of our borders, outside of our remit, and let's engage with other people. At the Fred Hutch, they were having a lag time with radiology at the UW, even though they're partners and they're even under the same sort of name. And it was simple as talking with them. This was really early in their lean journey. And they were like, oh, you don't need this form? We're filling out this form wrong? How can I make the work easier for you? And then the radiologist was like, how can we make the work easier for you? And they were helping each other. And they got those cases turned around lickety split, right? So sometimes it's as easy as that, but we have to have that orientation cross silo.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for asking that, Kim. It's a fabulous question. Yeah. Well, this has been, you think it's fun for you. This is super fun for me. And I just think you're all amazing. There's tremendous questions. Obviously, you all are at a, elevated level of understanding. And I just love being there for you. So please feel free to reach out. You can email me and ask me questions. You can get me through Talia, whatever you want. I'm happy to chit chat or anything. If you're on Capitol Hill and you want to go have coffee.
Thank you so much, Jim. This was amazing. And a lot of the questions I heard, even one that I asked earlier, you can also learn some of this stuff, I would say, also in the workshop that we're having on Thursday, which is how to get your ideas across to leadership. They're going to talk about, ways to pitch that idea. And sometimes lean is the idea. Sometimes you have
Y'all
leadership.
got to sign up for that.
Yes, you do. Like I said, we've got 27 folks signed up so far, but it goes up to 35. So if you think you can make it on Thursday, sign up. But sometimes lean is that idea. Sometimes it's just about sharing a concept with your leader that has not yet made it there. And we are going to go over the tools on that workshop on how to do that. But thank you, Jim. You've been amazing. And when you give me that handout, I'll make sure to include that link on the blast that I send out to the community. So we will send out a recap of this. If you all are not familiar with the blast, there will be the recording on there if you want to go rewatch it, as well as a handout that Jim is going to provide for us. So
and
thank you all.
The updated slide deck
Yes.
will be put into that link. So
yes, because Jim loves this topic so much that he was in there moving and grooving
Sorry.
and adding a few things, but no, that's
and
all good. We love it.
I was destroying Talia's life is what I was doing.
Not at all. You bring light to it. You bring light to it. Yay! So thank you all for coming. Thank you, Jim, for presenting, and have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday. Bye.
Bye all.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.